Now more of the Mid-Coast Morning Buzz with Richard and Jim. Radio 9, WCME.
Marijuana is Maine ready for its legalization? To speak to those points, we have Portland State Representative Diane Russell, who is a sponsor of a marijuana legalization bill here in Maine, and also Bath State Representative Jennifer Dechant, who sponsored a public forum that was held this Saturday in Bath. Representatives, thank you so much for coming in this morning.
Thanks for having us. Good morning.
Jim, you attended the forum?
Yes, and that forum featured an awful lot of remarks, I must say, from Diane Russell, state representative from Portland. You represent a good chunk of the downtown area in Portland.
Yes, the Mundry Hill and the Old Port area.
And Jennifer Dechant, with whom we'll speak in just a moment, Bath State Representative, was the sponsor. Diane, let me start it off with the skeptical question I probably hear most from average Joes and Josephines on the street. When you talk to them about legalizing marijuana, most of them are fairly quick to acknowledge that our dominant drug of choice in this culture, alcohol, has wreaked all kinds of havoc on the culture. And with that in mind, they say, why do we need another legal drug?
Well, I think the response to that is that we're providing a safer alternative with marijuana. Marijuana is objectively safer than alcohol. There are no overdoses on record with marijuana. On the contrary, people overdose on alcohol on a regular basis. So I think that's first and foremost a part of that to answer that question. But I think the overarching thing here is that this, whether you believe in legalization of marijuana or not, the fact of the matter is the issue is coming to our state. And as a state lawmaker, I firmly believe that we have an obligation to get ahead of this issue and to not let the genie out of the bottle. So what my bill would do is to create a regulatory framework from which we can protect the interests of the public, that we can get it out of the hands of young people or have more control over the market to do that. And then the question of whether to legalize or not, that should be left up to the people. And my bill comes with a referendum to do just that.
You say you're going to get more control of the market through legalization. Some skeptics would, of course, say you're simply turning over the market to, effectively, you're waving the white flag and deferring to criminal elements.
Well, I think right now we've waved the white flag and deferred to criminal elements. I mean, when was the last time that you heard of a drug dealer carding a kid? It just doesn't happen. But if you go to your local liquor store or your local grocery store, it happens all the time. They card people and they make sure that that there are policies in place and there are consequences if you sell to minors. You know, the challenge that we're facing right now is that we are forcing people to go to drug dealers to get access to their product, and people are consuming it in this state, whether you like to admit that or not. And it's time that we do it in a safer manner, that we have control over the market. Right now, the only people who have control over this market are the drug dealers. Instead of giving them the profit motive, instead of sending people to them, why aren't we allowing licensed retailers who have consequences, who have relationships in this community, to actually be distributing this in a more effective manner? Let's make sure that the product is safe, which we don't know right now. Let's make sure that we're looking at the potency levels and that we're keeping that in check, that we're testing it. But again, my bill sets up the regulatory framework for what it would look like if this passed, because the fact of the matter is this debate is coming, and it's probably going to come in a citizens' initiative. My bill would ultimately set up that framework ahead of schedule, ahead of time, and then let the people decide whether or not they want to legalize marijuana.
We have, of course, Joel Mary, Saginaw County Sheriff, spoke at some length on Saturday at the forum in Bath that you were very much a part of. We recorded those remarks. We're going to hear some extended remarks from him here in just a moment. I want everybody to know that he was invited to be here this morning. He has another engagement. We hope to have him later in the week, but we do want to work his remarks in. And he said some things, Diane, that I got a feeling you may not have fully responded to on Saturday, and I'd be interested in hearing your reply to him. But one other thing that I just want to follow up on before we go to those remarks, you made a statement to the effect that there have never been any overdoses as a result of marijuana, and perhaps not, but after you made that remark at the forum the other day, someone, I think it may have been the sheriff, said, well, perhaps, no marijuana overdoses, but nonetheless, kids, young people get started down a dangerous track with marijuana. Your response?
Well, that goes back to the idea that marijuana is a gateway drug, and I think the substance abuse counselor who was there as well spoke to that, and he talked about how it's not just marijuana. This is a product mix of drugs that young kids end up getting into, so you can't really pinpoint that it just started with marijuana. But it's my personal belief that it's not marijuana that's the gateway, it's the drug dealer. If you send someone to a drug dealer, their job is to upsell you onto something that is more harsh. And they can do that by offering you a free sample. They can do that by lacing the marijuana in of its own right. So I think that we need to understand that marijuana is not the gateway drug that people have been said that it is. In fact, people have, they don't say that alcohol is a gateway drug, but you still see 12 and 13-year-olds drinking alcohol. They don't say that cigarettes are a gateway drug, and you see 12 and 13-year-olds smoking cigarettes. On any level, that's a bad thing. We should not be encouraging our youth to do this, but we need to have control over the market if we're going to have any opportunity to get it out of their hands.
I want to pursue something for a moment that was not brought up at the forum that I think is a very important angle on all this. Has anybody done any research to determine to what extent kids, young people, are motivated to smoke marijuana in response to the fact that it's illegal and that their parents, in many cases, are telling them not to do it? Because I will tell you, and I don't mind admitting it at all in front of this audience, when I was a kid, I smoked pot. And I doubt if I ever would have had an interest in it had it not been A, illegal, and B, my parents telling me not to do it. That meant I had to do it, I had to try it. Anybody done much research on that stuff?
Well, I think that people are out there talking about it. I think it's more, I don't necessarily know if there's research to quantify that, but I think that any one of us can experience what it feels like to have a taboo in that moment of excitement when you cross it. That's part of the appeal to it. So I think in lieu of studies, common sense will tell you that that's probably the case. To what degree that is, I'm not sure, but I can tell you when I was in high school, I had friends pushing marijuana on me all the time there, and there was never alcohol available because, oh wait, we got carded. And I chose not to consume it because my parents had been heavily influencing me to not try this stuff. And I was frankly afraid that my mom would ensure that my body parts were found all over the country if I did. So I avoided it at all costs.
We want to talk to Jennifer Dechant, who, by the way, is on the fence, as I understand it, on this issue. We're going to talk to her a little bit more about that. But first, we're going to hear from the other key participant in Saturday's forum, and this would be Saginaw County Sheriff Joe Mary, who has a 35-year law enforcement background, and once pulled Diane Russell's car out of an accident or something. What was that about?
About a month and a half ago, there was a freak snowstorm, and my colleague, I had actually left my car in Augusta because I didn't want to drive home in it, and so I was riding home with a friend who had an SUV, and he's not really used to the snow, but he lost control of the vehicle, and we went way off the side of the road. Thankfully, nothing happened. We just ended up buried in a snowbank, but it was Sheriff Mary who pulled over and checked in with us, and we remained super grateful to this day.
And it wasn't OUI, right?
It was not. It was operating under the snow.
All right. Been there.
And even so, the bottom line is, even though you might have some differences on this marijuana issue with Sheriff Mary, he is on a certain level your hero, right?
Oh, a personal hero. But I think it also is pretty indicative of where he stands when he came out and he didn't say, I'm in opposition to this. He was clear. He's like, the people are coming to a different place, and I think that's an important component.
Very thoughtful, articulate guy. As you're about to find out here, we're going to hear from Sheriff Mary as he spoke on Saturday at Bath City Hall, and then we'll get some response from State Representative Diane Russell.
I think it's wrong to think that if we regulate marijuana that there will be diminished use. I also think that it may be a little misleading to think that if we tax it, it's going to do away with the black market. What we do know is that in the states that have legalized marijuana, and Representative Russell did mention this, the price dropped significantly. When the price drops significantly, what happens? Sales go up. right? Let's look at some economics here. So now all of a sudden the sales are going up. When sales go up, that means access becomes more open. When access becomes more open, that means there's a greater probability that marijuana is going to end up in the hands of those who we don't want it to end up in the hands of. And that would be our young people. That would be our students that are in school. That would be people that have the chance of being affected much greater. So what do? We increase the tax. And Representative Russell talked about jumping that tax up to maybe $100 an ounce. Well, what's going to happen to the black market? Here we go again, because all you got to do, we know that, is in your basement, you put up some lights and you bring in a hydrating system and you grow it. One of the things that we do know, I think, has been kind of an unintended consequence with the medicinal marijuana, and I think my other 15 colleagues for the other 16 counties in the state will attest to the same thing. What we're seeing is an abuse of that law. So they are entitled to grow 6 plants. More and more we're finding people with cards who can legally grow marijuana, but they're not growing 6 plants. They got 60 plants. They got 70 plants. In some cases over 100. So they're still violating the law. And why are they doing that? For their own personal use? I would suggest not. I would suggest there's still a vibrant black market for marijuana out there.
Saginaw County Sheriff Joel Mary speaking at a forum on the proposed legalization of marijuana held late this past Saturday afternoon at Bat City Hall, sponsored by one of our guests here, from whom we'll be hearing in just a moment, State Representative Jennifer Dechant. Diane Russell, those remarks were basically countering some arguments you had made earlier. What do you say to Sheriff Mary?
Well, there was a lot to unpack in that, and he wasn't actually countering my remarks in that so much as he was actually agreeing with a significant number of them. But I think his last point was vital. There's still a black market in Maine, and that means that there's still a market for marijuana consumption, and that would probably be for personal use. And so the more we can do to mitigate that black market and to make it more on the books and that we're selling it through licensed business owners in a more rational policy, I think the better we're going to be. But let me talk specifically to the tax issue. So before Colorado legalized marijuana for personal use, it was about $350 to $400 an ounce. It had started to drop a little bit with their medical dispensaries, but it was still about $350 to $400 an ounce. From what I've heard, that has, since it's been legal, it has dropped about $200 an ounce. So, to $200 an ounce. So my bill actually calls for a $50 an ounce excise tax, and I think that there's certainly room for debate as to how much that would be, and that's at the wholesale level. There also would be a 5% retail sales tax on that. But to Sheriff Mary's argument that the more you increase the tax, the more the black market is going to continue to exist is sort of false, because at the very least, let's just go with the $100 figure. So we see marijuana at $400 an ounce. It drops $200 an ounce, and we put a $100 tax on it. People are still saving $100 an ounce, and instead that money is being spent in licensed retailers. It is being spent in the state of Maine by and supporting local business, and these are people that actually card their consumers. So I think that there's a false notion there. Now, getting to his point about, well, people are going to just set up some grow lights. Well, that's why we allow under the bill that people can grow up to 6 plants for their own personal consumption. So he's right, but it's built into the bill that way so that people would be allowed to do that. But I will say that, folks are allowed to grow tomato plants. So by his own admission, we would put grocery stores out of business because people would be growing their own produce. And they're not. People are still going to the grocery store to buy produce because they don't have the time or the knowledge, I have a black thumb myself, to be able to grow the plant. But the other piece, too, is this notion that increased sales tax is going to drive people to a black market. Well, the same arguments were used in the prohibition of alcohol. And you don't see people not buying alcohol in this state. I serve on the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee. We are currently negotiating the liquor contract, and I will tell you, in the public hearing, it was only Sheriff Mary. Sheriff Mary was the only person in the entire day that showed up and asked about substance abuse, which was really disheartening to me because the entire day's public hearing was about how much money are we going to make as a state. So on this one product, all people are debating is the money. And on this product, all people are debating is the abuse of it. Now, both have the capacity to be abused. There's no question. Alcohol is significantly more addictive and I believe significantly more destructive to society. It doesn't mean that I don't enjoy bourbon on occasion. I do. But the fact of the matter is we need to set up a regulatory framework that allows people to do what they're going to do anyway, what they're already doing, particularly in this state. It is one of the #1 cash crops and it has been for a long time in Maine. But to do it in a responsible, regulated way. And this notion that that the only people that smoke marijuana are your stoners who are sitting on the couch drinking, playing video games. It's not to say that we don't know that person. Every one of us has met someone like that. That's true. But what we're not talking about is the middle America, the Maine people that are highly productive, that don't talk about this because they're afraid that they might lose their career. So there's a whole side of marijuana consumption that we're not seeing, that we're not talking about, but we all know those people too.
Diane Russell, State Representative from Portland, is with us here this morning. She is the sponsor of a bill pending in the legislature that would legalize marijuana, but not before providing for a statewide referendum.
Absolutely.
On the legalization of marijuana. That's a key part of it. Let us meet the woman who put together this forum that we've been talking about in Bath on Saturday, Jennifer Dechant, Democratic State Representative from Bath. Tell me, we don't see forums at City Hall in Bath on just any and every issue that comes before the legislature. Why did you decide to do this in the first place?
Well, this was actually the second in a series of community forums that I'm going to be hosting of topical information that's coming before the legislature, and one that I believe is relevant for consideration for the general population. But specifically with this issue, a constituent of mine, Peter Alexander, had given me a call and recommended that this would be something that he thought people would find timely and interesting. And of course, reflecting what's going on in the federal level and also with the medicinal dispensaries right now, and the more and more I researched it for the forum, the more I agreed with Peter of its timeliness, relevance, because the bill is going to be heard in a couple weeks, and then of course, as Representative Russell mentioned, if indeed it passes the legislature, it's going to be consideration for all of us.
And you are officially on the fence right now. You have not made up your mind about this, and what would you say is keeping you on the fence?
I think that it's the opportunity to learn more about it is keeping me on the fence, in the sense that the more that I hear from Representative Russell, it resonates. The more, especially with what Sheriff Mary was saying on Saturday, raised a lot of issues regarding the sustainability, the treatment part of it, the impact that it could have on our youth, and drying up the black market or enhancing the black market. It's a very complex state of issues wrapped up within all of this, whether being on the fence of deciding pro or against. But all of these conversations are ones that help me, and help me make a better decision, and certainly will take feedback from my constituents. I'm
not trying to whip out the crystal ball here and make predictions, but it occurs to me, I've worked a little bit in politics, I think about the situation that confronts you here. Might it be that you could well wind up supporting the bill, if for no other reason than to get it before the voters of the state? I mean, you could do that and still, have some issues and questions of your own about whether legalization is a good idea for Maine.
Absolutely, I agree with that 100%. I think that it is really an issue of having people make the decision, and it's got a underscoring to the pleasure of the public process. The public hearing that will happen before the legislature in a couple weeks. Representative Russell also mentioned that the bill is going to be amended. So even in its 20-some pages as it exists now, it's still going to change. So, and that will happen largely through the public process. So absolutely, I agree that's an opportunity to let the folks decide.
Okay, we're going to wind this up, but Diane Russell, the lead sponsor of this bill, give me in 30 seconds, about 30 seconds, give me your best shot at why we should think differently about how we approach marijuana in Maine.
Thank you for that. There will be a referendum in 2016, and I think that we are in a better position with as Representative Dechant pointed out, going through a public process with a public hearing where we can weigh the interests of people like Sheriff Mary, but also parents and teachers, substance abuse counselors, so that we can craft legislation that is responsible and reflects the values and the real public safety concerns that people across this state have. But then I think once you set up that regulatory framework, it's important to let the people decide on this issue, and that's why I think this is a really solid opportunity for Maine people to get it right. On so many levels, we wait, and this is an opportunity to get ahead of it and not let the genie out of the bottle and do it rationally.
Okay, State Representatives Diane Russell and Jennifer Dechant, thanks so much for coming in here this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
We do appreciate it. We know it's early, not early for us, but early for you. And we'll be doing a lot more on this, and we hope very soon to have Sheriff Mary in here. Again, he was invited this morning.
Radio 9 WCME, the Mid-Coast Morning Buzz. Thank you, ladies.